So hello, thank you very much for the invitation. And as you heard already, I can quit my first part, that's good. About mythology. My art is directly connected to everyday life. Whether I see people on the street which have no right to stay or to work, or whether I look at the tomato, and you can think why it could be interesting to do research about the tomato. And the beginning question for me, it was when I wake up in the morning and I go to my breakfast table, for example, I go 2 or 3 or 4 meters maximum in my huge flat, and the tomato in Austria, 80% of the tomatoes travel 3,000 kilometers to my table. So, and this big difference starts to interest me. And I thought, what does it mean, this number of 3,000 kilometers? It's a good information, but I do not understand what does it mean. And sorry, I will read more than I talk because I'm not very good in English. And thank you very much to Thomas. He translated my presentation for you. So, yes, also to understand this abstract number, I traveled exactly this distance. I wanted to know what does 3,000 kilometers mean that I can bite in this tomato. At my breakfast, perhaps with basil from Italy and salt from some sea. So I wanted to know how it felt for me on the road and the story of the whole transport that I wanted to convey. I documented the reality of this journey and give company to 20 tons of tomatoes. And this I published in a book. It's 13. And it's also in English. So for me, it was very important to see it personally. Why? I call it the yardstick of personal experience. The yardstick of personal experience combines distance and the subjective sense of time. On the one hand, the abstract measure of kilometers, and on the other hand, the direct experience of the distance. I texted my experiences constantly to the Neue Galerie Graz, like you see here. My messages were shown on the project home space of Unfair Trade exhibition as they arrived. The fact that the journey and the exhibition took place at the same time and that the texts were communicated immediately helped to demonstrate the dimension of the run. So the people could read at the same time as I was sitting in the truck and telling the report how it works, how long we stand at every border, how often we have to go with the truck on a wait, how often we were controlled, how less he was sleeping, how less we were allowed to drink, not to lose time, and all these things. So the people who are interested, they read it over 6.5 days, all the same distance time, so they could get a feeling also how long it takes to get through these 3,000 kilometers. Tomatoes and roads, do you know, have a very long tradition. I don't know if you know, that would be very interesting for me. There was, I don't know if there still are, tomato jokes in Austria with the tomatoes which 2 tomatoes crossed the street and one said, "Come on, catch up," while another one was crossing the street and hit by a car. I don't know if you know such kind of jokes. If you would know tomato jokes, please, this book is waiting empty for tomato jokes. I'm collecting them because I can't remember, as you see, very well and very good, so please don't forget. The tomato is not only very beautiful shiny red fruit, it's also really, really important. You can see it It has the importance of the whole world. When you put it on a box to sell, you see it covers the whole world. Also, if it is not alone on the whole world. For example, there are a lot of different marketing gags. A lot of different well-designed marketing stories, so it's hard in English. So I tried to do research how it really will function and work with the logistic and transport of the fruits, how the average distance is managed and how the logistic functions. And I did call and went to various institutions and groups, and everyone possessed different specific details of information. For instance, Global 2000 have some alternative das ist 5. The Forum for Science and Environment has information on the possibility of making savings in traffic, and the Traffic Club of Austria can provide information on taking lorries off the road and making use of the railways, and so on and so on. And every institution had some piece, but not that one I was interested in. So for me, I went to a lot to the distribution place in Austria. The main distribution place in Austria for vegetables is Großgrünmarkt Wien-Inzersdorf. It's in Vienna, a little bit outside of Vienna. And the expert on what the experts who know what goes where and which route, they are the truck drivers. So I was talking to the truck drivers. I tried to talk to the truck drivers, but the language barriers were an issue. English and German was hardly spoken, and even my English is not so well. But so the next time I go there, I brought papers, and we started to draw together, and it was much fun. But they told me really interesting thing. They brought from Turkey fish to England, for example, and on the way back, you see grass for playing soccer from Austria to Syria. That's so. Yeah, and there are a lot of very amazing loads they have. So it was never boring, and I spent weeks over weeks there to talk to them and to draw with them some sketches about what they bring there. And so I also learned to know one elderly friendly man who was driving his truck on exactly this route, about 3,000 kilometers. So I asked him if I could give him company to see how it's happened and how it really will work. And when I got invited to the exhibition Unfair Trade, curated by Peter Weibel and Günther Holler-Schuster, I could finally realize the project How Far is Far, the yardstick of personal experience. In my section of the exhibition at the Neue Galerie Graz, I piled up hundreds of boxes of tomato boxes, different, and they were from all over the world, and mixed them with my own designers for farmers, which were displayed in Graz. I just made for small tomato boxes from small farmers of Graz and mixed them through the big company tomato boxes. And so the farmers itself came in the exhibition. And while the boxes from different places and different stories were displayed in Graz, I traveled on the average route of a tomato to Austria. The distance I traveled is equivalent to the 3,000, and it was on the way from Antalya in southern Turkey to Wien Inzersdorf. On the way back, the driver is picking up salami from Kindorf near Graz and brought to Tiflis before returning to Antalya. So in this project I discussed the mismatch of availability of goods from far places and the enormous efforts taken to produce and distribute them. The absurd economic logic of global transfer was important to connect to a personal understanding. And I hope the people did understand it then also in a much better way. So, my curiosity to experience reality and to make understanding possible in the field of inordinate pieces of differing information for me and for others lead me to various actions. I hope, is it understandable if I read the English? Yeah? It's okay. So the resume of the journey with the tomatoes was this one. It's Gummiringel and, and the tomato. So now we will stop the road movie and we'll go to the next project.
Zurück.
Okay, danke.
Bitte.
So actually this picture does not say much, but in reality it says everything. Why? You see a feather, but the feather is held from a man's hand, which is an anthropologist in the Museum of Natural History in Vienna. And the feather is not at the end of a bird. So that's the beginning of this project. Everything started with an invitation to do an artistic project in Bremen. And there they had a very famous museum. It's called the Overseas Museum. So of course I went there. And there I was surrounded by processions of traders and showcases with stuffed birds. And I had a flash of recognition of these feathers. I saw them the first time on the bird itself. And at the same time I saw this showcase, childhood memories return, a lady in a tram with a hat with strange, beautifully curled little brown feathers. I remembered watching the bobbing movements while she was sitting some stations, some few tram stations, and now I see them again at the stuffed bird. And I start to read. The showcase says Birds of Paradise. I have never seen these birds before. From the very beginning, I started to photograph the collections, and as if you would see the birds for the first time in real nature, which was true. I saw them the first time. I I saw before only the feathers at the head. The drawings document the fictional parts. You will see the imagination and the mythology of the past. And there you see some photos from Bremen. I have it, and some from Vienna, and they from the Natural Museum of History, and they have the same approach for this in the past. So I knew this ensemble of feathers from the head in Vienna and now see it for the first time on a bird's body in the Overseas Museum. Are there any connections between my childhood memories and the exhibited paradise birds in Bremen? I wanted to see what connections there are or if my memory was wrong. It's never sure, so. The first focus with this topic I found in preparing all the connections to become visible, the economic and political structure which began to show since the occupation of the New World. So we can look, this is of the drawings. This is, for example, a desire. It's a drawing that shows museum without birds. It's a paradise for birds, a museum with perch, and perches without birds. So about this is the head as they were it in 1910 in Paris. This in Holland, for example. And so I learned of the trade relation between Bremen and Austrian cities. The birds of paradise do not live in Bremen or any other place in Europe. The birds of paradise are only living in Papua New Guinea. So that's why I was starting to work about Papua New Guinea. At that time, the golden age of trade in Bremen, they had a colony in Papua New Guinea. It's called a German, it's called, I tell you later, where I have it in English. So at the existence of the German colony in New Guinea at the end of 18th and the beginning of 19th century. At that time you also could buy German bananas and the German bird of paradise, all above their decorative feathers. And what else is there to find when you unfold the past? So that's about the trade. After the first birds of paradise were brought to Europe from Magellan's ships, Magellan self was not coming again, he died before, in 1522, they became sought after objects for cabinet of curiosities. But the birds had no legs, and which led all to kinds of scientific theories about this distant land. Even more than 200 years later, other discoverers and traveling salesmen brought back legless birds. I find pictures of this in the standard work of History of Nature Animals by Jan Johnston. This is the book, the History of Nature of Animals, which was in every university, and you see at the last bird he has no legs, also the others, and I cut it out the others and put the trade routes behind. So it was also on the university books, and it was very strange about the theories who was the scientists and artists then working about. At the turn of these centuries, the expensive feathers were in great demand as a fashion accessoire in Austria and European cities. The German colony, German New Guinea, so that's it's called, sent thousands of them to Europe, and millionaires, that are the women or men who stick the feathers on their head, attached these feathers to the heads, which were worn in public, so that I did know them and I could recognize them in Bremen. And with the import of the paradise birds, also another totally different story was written. Lina Henle, 1851 to 1941, nicknamed the German's bird mother, fought a tough fight with the fashion industry, and she won. Around 1910, as these hats were very, These hats especially were very like to be worn. Also sehr gefragt waren. Popular, thank you. She made the Act Against Feathered Hats, the Bird of Paradise campaign. It was the first environmental protection campaign with international commitment. And the feathers were taken down as démodé, not, what was that? Not beliebt, démodé.
Not fashion.
Yeah, not, it was not fashion. So, that was a photo. I made a photo for them, the wood in the clouds. So if they have no feet, where should they sit? I give them the feet of Max Ernst Birdsman. And here you see a citate of one artist. He also sit the bird on the clouds and give the birds to drink from the clouds water. It was in artist's books in Bologna, about 1600. That was the trade. There are thousands of birds every month. And here he showed me how they put away the feathers for the hat. And that's how they take it forever. So, and here, I retraced the process of the transfer between these places, different cultures and times seen through artists' eyes, and want to bring the thread running through the research into the present. What do the relations between both ends of the trade chain look like now? What role do the birds of paradise and their feathers play in PNG, their origin context? The information I found reflect our point of view on the island Papua. I cannot find any statements of the people from Papua New Guinea itself, not about their position today, nor about the birds of paradise. So I decided to travel to this country to gain clarity far of these projections. Oh, that's another, I do not have to explain every picture, that's not necessary. So, in order to explore the central theme of this former trade relations and the resulting connections, I am traveling to the other end of the trade chain and to the place the birds of paradise come from, to Papua New Guinea. But it was not easy. Everything I found out researching about a stay there was pointing in one direction. Traveling to PNG for a single woman without sufficient funds is not possible. You should pay security, the criminality is very high, so you should not go there. So for months I had a correspondence with different groups. I asked everyone for an evaluation of the situation, and a network occurred which encouraged me to set up for the country. With many questions and little money in my bags, I traveled to PNG. Now we are in PNG. That's the pitch in English, and it means you talk. And so I called the project and exhibition there You Talk. I wanted to see the other end of the trade chain and wanted this part to talk. So we start with Gigmai. I was introduced to him in Port Moresby. He's an artist, and his family. You can see here, he's around 65 years old, I guess. And he had exhibited in German already. He's named after a bird. His ancestors descended from the birds. He's imitating the sound of a bird, so I heard what a Gigmai sounds. As far as I stood, it is a kind of a parrot. He's telling me how important it is to listen to the birds. They give warning when thunderstorm comes, and they show when the atmosphere is relaxed. They know when the tsunami comes 100%. I heard it over and over again at my journey. I take it with me as an immovable truth. This is one of his art pieces in his garden. In all regions, the feathers of these birds I found used as headdress or also as on the roads. That's a parrot. I saw that's the bird of paradise. You see it, and only the feathers. I saw it also in political demonstrations, like here. The situation for the birds of paradise is explainable in a few sentences. You are interested in the bird of paradise. The person I was asking laughs. Everyone does that, and everyone was happy that someone is interested in their bird because the bird is only living in Papua New Guinea and West Papua, the other part of the island. Yes, the birds are very shy. Only in the highlands you can still see them flying free. They need the rainforest to live. Today it is the only place where there is still some left in the highlands. It's a small part of Papua New Guinea. According to the natives, there is not one single place where you cannot hear the buzz saws cutting down the forests. Many times the habitat is ruined with extensive planting of oil palms. Which companies allow the different logging companies clearance of the rainforests with all their money? There are also a lot of European companies involved. The goods shipped directly from PNG to the European Union now is tuna fish. Cans of tuna from Wiebeek to Madang. For example, the Diana tuna. These grounds are yet not overfished. In Madang, the first fight against the approach of the Chinese mining company MCC is an issue. So I took every chance for contact there I could take. When they stand beside the street, the security guard, the boss of a clan or his wife, daughter, family, or people I meet at the street, or everyone gave me a new piece of puzzle to understand the today's situation in the country. Some of my contacts I arranged from home, some established right there. There were many NGOs. For example, here I did this from the WWF, I think it's called. They try to replant, which is like a homeopathic doses, and or the EU representative in Port Moresby, or missionaries from the Catholic Church or Protestant Church. Only with enterprises, the companies, it was hard to get in touch. The Chinese and Philippine ones denied to let me into their factories or also to talk to them. Only the South Tuna Corporation was proud of their standards and gave me a tour through the tuna fish factory. Questions on the fishing methods or their fleet. Now we are here in this factory. As questions on the fishing factory or their fishing methods, he did not answer. But according to the very nice EU representative in Port Moresby, everything is under control and illegal overfishing in the South Seas is not possible. On this picture you can get a glimpse how tuna fish, which you can buy canned in every supermarket, is processed. Rosa, a woman in Madang, delivers a totally different picture. She helps people who do not want to give the want to give in the pressures of the logging companies and who do not want their land to be deforested. I asked her what I should tell to the people at the other end of the trade chain. And what Rosa told me, I printed on these flyers. So you can take home if you are interested. So notes on the situation of Papua New Guinea, the other end of the trade chain. I was tracing a collection of small objects which are speaking for today's everyday life in PNG, information and field notes I packed into a box during my stay. Every week I sent one of these boxes to Austria, 4 boxes in total. The former trade, now this is too long, we cut it. That's all. You see how far they are at the beach and how minimal is the risk to get overfished, also the south part of the sea. That's the fishing boats from the people there, and the fishing mark from the people. That's tuna fish. That's the hafen of the port of Port Moresby. Also they trading orchids, vanilla with a French company, and a lot of coffee sorts, very, very good coffee, one of the best of the world, I heard. And you see the paradise birds as everywhere. They are so proud of it, more than I had no idea as I was getting there. So, not too far. And all the things I collected, I put in a box, and all the content of the box becomes an assemblage. The boxes transport messages. These visual messages derive from the context in situ. The boxes serve as transport medium for the message, like the SMS I showed you in the project before. Along the lines of the historical trade with bird of paradise, now the self-packed items get to the other end of the chain again, from this side back to Graz. But with this dislocation, they get to another place which is located on the opposite end of the world, and there they are displaced from their origin context again. They decontextualized in another cultural understanding, and they are newly viewed and interpreted from this new point of view. This is why I invited different persons from different disciplines to do a new contextualization for these boxes. The addresses where I sent the field crates are from various specialist fields. I invited architecture and philosophy, curator and artists, ornithology and science, trade, economy and management. The unknown contents of the crates were prepared for the exhibition by these persons and then presented without any consultation with me. My concept of this choreography is based on the fact that the bird skin, when they were brought to Europe in the past, were without legs, which caused the European scientists, artists or other interested parties to invent all kinds of theories, putting the exotic beings into a completely new context. Artists have drawn their theories, like the one I showed you, and like myself. I was interested in the change of meaning when transferring objects into a geographically and culturally different sphere. Portability of an object does not mean the portability of the idea. People in Graz tell something about these objects, and the objects tell stories. It's like a dialogue, it goes back and forth. The imagination about the other end of the trade chain, and thus a totally different culture is accessible only in mediated form as represented reality. Making the forms of representation a topic themselves in all their relativity was very important to me. The crates were exhibited in a container in a public space in Graz. The 4 different reports of the exhibition are visible as 4 islands. The display is arranged like in a museum of history of nature with enormous amorphen Formen, spricht man das? Amorphous forms which reflect their original habitat. Between these islands, a cartographic line is spanned across the room showing information on today's PNG. Little quotes tell from the countless chats and interviews with the people from PNG. So, as you can see, dealing with everyday objects lead me right in the center of current and explosive economical and political dilemmas. And here you see also the birds of paradise on a beer which is brewed in Port Moresby, which a Bavarian started. And I close with the beer, the bird of paradise and the tomato, and hope you will look very interested for the surrounding of your daily life now. And thank you for listening.